Councillor Thompson, want to join us? Good evening. We're in Council Chambers for a special council meeting, public planning. Councillors' declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda has been circulated. Councillor Maracas, thank you. Councillor Kim, second. Comments or questions on that? All in favor, please. Contrary? That's carried. We have 3 planning applications. I have a public statement that I read. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding a proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendments. No decision on applications for items 1 and 2 will be made this evening. Council may make a decision on application item number 3. For each planning application that will be considered by Council tonight, the following process will occur. The town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning application being considered. The applicant will then be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address the issues raised in staff reports or public concerns which have already been filed. Following the presentations, we will open up for members of the public to make a statement. And after we get a number of those questions or comments, I'll turn that over to staff or the applicant for an answer. And you have 5 minutes when you come up with respect to a public statement. Once we've heard from all the members of the public who would wish to speak to the application, we'll close the public session of the meeting. We'll go to members of council to see if they have questions with the proponent, and then we put the report on the floor. It should be noted that a comprehensive report will be prepared and presented to a future general committee meeting assessing the merits of the applications before us and providing council with a recommendation for consideration. It's very important that the town receive the correct name and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning applications this evening. If you plan to speak at council at this meeting or wish to be notified of further council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete one of the green interested party forms that Linda is holding up. And please give it back to Linda tonight before you leave. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have a right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Municipal Board. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help the clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be addressed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the clerk to confirm that notifications to the public has occurred as required by the Planning Act. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to item 1, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Velo Holdings, Inc., 330 McClellan Way, file number ZBA-2016-01. On March 10, 2016, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. Notice of the public planning meeting signs were also posted on the subject lands fronting McClellan Way. With respect to item 2, applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, Carpino Construction, Inc., 15278 Yonge Street, file numbers OPA-2015-04, ZBA-2015-10, and related file SP-2015-08. On March 10, 2016, notice of second public planning meeting was given by mail to all interested parties. And lastly, regarding item 3, proposed zoning bylaw amendment, the Priestley Holding Corporation, 125 Edward Street, file ZBA-2015-03. Notice of public planning meeting was also given by mail to all interested parties. Public planning meeting notification for all 3 items has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will now turn to the Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentations. Mr. Lamuna, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The town planner, Marty Rokas, will provide a presentation and an overview for the item number 1, and the owner's planning consultant, Mr. Mike Manette, is also here to speak to item 1. Marty?
Thank you. The application that I have tonight is for 330 McClellan Way, and the application is for rezoning and it's file ZBA-2016-01. The property is located on McClellan Way, just a little bit east of Bathurst Street, and it's surrounded on the north, south, and east by residential properties. In the official plan, the property is designated existing commercial, and that's a broad designation that is further refined as convenience commercial area. And the convenience commercial area designation recognizes existing convenience and neighborhood scale commercial plazas. Some of the permitted uses, or the permitted uses that are in the convenience commercial designation include convenience stores, food stores, variety stores, financial institutions, restaurants, personal service shops, and child care centers. The official plan mapping is shown here. It should be noted the property is in the black outline, and it should be noted that the official plan mapping is general. So it doesn't, it's kind of on a large scale, doesn't always follow property lines, and that's why the black outline is a little bit off from the red, which shows the existing commercial. And the zoning bylaw is more exact, and it does line up with the property lines. In the zoning, the property is zoned local commercial C1-1 exception zone. And the permitted uses include retail stores, personal service shops, special bake shops, a public library, business and professional offices, banks and other financial institutions, and one apartment dwelling. The owner has applied for an amendment to the zoning bylaw to allow more uses and some site-specific provisions. And here's a map showing where the zoning on the property, the C1-1, and in the shaded is the property. This is what's on the site right now. This is the existing site plan for when the property was originally developed. The commercial plaza is towards the back of the property. Parking is in the front and along the west side. And you can see that there's residential on the north, south, across McClellan Way, and on the east. So what the applicant is proposing is to amend the zoning bylaw to permit additional commercial and institutional uses. I'll get into what specifically those uses are on the next slide. And site-specific zoning provision related to height of the building and side and rear yard setbacks. They also want to increase the maximum total gross floor area of the building, and there's a cap on the amount of gross floor area for each unit, and they are applying to remove that. The applicant is not proposing to do any new development at the moment. They're just looking for, basically what they're looking for is flexibility to, for any potential developments in the future and to attract a wider variety of tenants. The details of what they're applying for in this table. So on the left column, you have the existing zoning. On the right, you have what's being proposed. So those uses that I listed earlier that are permitted right now are under permitted uses on the left. And in addition to those, I won't read through every single one of them, but some of the key ones include an animal hospital, a clinic, a restaurant, and residential dwellings above the commercial units. Now, the flexibility I was talking about earlier comes into play in these provisions for the site, which include the rear yard. They're applying to reduce the rear yard from 7.5 meters to the required rear yard to 4.5, as well with the side yards on both sides. They're looking to increase the permitted height from 1 story to 1 story for commercial plus the residential above. And the total complex floor area, which is permitted now, is 1,120 square meters, and the proposed would bring that up to 1,800 square meters with no maximum for each commercial unit. They're also looking to have site-specific definitions for each of the permitted uses. Staff have done a preliminary review of the application. We have some initial comments and some things that we need to look into in more detail. Those include the suitability of the residential use above the first story, the suitability of the proposed commercial uses that are being applied for, the height of the building, and more details on what exactly is being proposed for the height of the building, for the allowed height of the building, and the floor areas with a cap on the commercial units, and the setbacks, the suitability of the setbacks, as well as the site-specific definitions. The building department has some concerns with the way that the definitions are being treated. I've talked to quite a few people from the neighborhood. I've received quite a few phone calls. Basically, what people are looking for is more details on what is being proposed, what uses are being proposed. The only real comment, the only concern that people have addressed to me is that there's some hesitance about having a bar that would be along with a restaurant that would be permitted if a restaurant is permitted. I'll let the people that are here today speak to in more detail about any potential concerns. The conclusions are noted. Staff will continue to work with the applicant to finalize outstanding technical matters, as well as comments received at the meeting tonight, and a comprehensive report with recommendations and options will be presented to Council for consideration and direction at a future General Committee meeting.
Thank you, Marty. Mr. Minette, please.
Thank you. Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Minette. I'm the agent and the planning consultant for Bello Holdings. The application before you tonight has been fairly well described by Mr. Rocco, and a few questions that have arisen or issues that have arisen that I recognize through reviewing the staff report is the suitability of the residential use above the first story. Currently, the zoning provides for an apartment as a use that's permitted. We've carried that forward. The applicant currently has no intention of having a second floor with residential above it. However, because in the existing bylaw it's a permitted use, we were indicating that if it was appropriate, we would be prepared to have residential above the commercial as a mixed use. That is not the intention currently, and if that is an issue, we would be happy to remove that from the list of permitted uses, which effectively would take away the one apartment that is currently permitted. That's something we can discuss with staff. Our intention is to meet with staff following the meeting, after we've heard all the comments and reviewed the agency comments, to deal with matters related to the definitions. In discussing with staff to date, we were trying to incorporate definitions that are coming from your new bylaw, because some of the definitions under the old bylaw were causing the confusion that created problems in the past with respect to having flexibility on uses. It seemed that when there was a new use that was being proposed for an available lease, there was issues as to whether or not we had to come in for a minor variance to accommodate a use that wasn't currently listed. So the major intent of the owner is to provide some flexibility, so if a use came in that was a newer type of use which hadn't been considered in older bylaws, that there wouldn't have to be a need to come to a committee of adjustment every time for a new use. So that was why we have the expanded list of permitted uses. And we had attempted to provide definitions in our draft bylaw to accommodate those based upon the definitions in the new bylaw. So I think that's something we can sort out with staff to make sure we're all on the same page on that. With respect to the side yard and rear yard setbacks, we were looking for some flexibility in the future in case there needed to be some expansion. Currently, there is no intention to expand the building from the current situation. We're looking more for the flexibility. The east yard, side yard setback, I believe, is a legal non-conforming, and so we wanted to make sure that that was a conforming dimension. So we need to confirm that. That's around the 4.5 meters. And I think that deals with most of the issues. The building height, of course, would only be changed if there was an additional use being proposed in the future. The raising of the minimum or the maximum area to 1,800 square meters was based upon the official plan definition, so that's why we incorporated that. So I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have or any questions that arise as any further submissions tonight. And we look forward to working with staff to finalize the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manette. I will now ask if there's any members of the public who would like to come forward and speak to this particular application. If you would just come up to the podium, if you would give us your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes. And as I always say, don't be bashful. So if there's no members of the public who wish to speak to this particular application, then I will ask members of council if they have any questions, either of Mr. Rokos or Mr. Manette with respect to the presentations up to this point. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Rokos, it seems like one of the big concerns for residents is the formation of a restaurant/bar or a bar. And according to the definition we have here, is there any way that we can make more clear in terms of the size of the restaurant, or does restaurant encompass a bar type establishment that serves some food? Can there be more clarity with that?
Mr. Rokos?
Through you, Mayor, Mr. Mayor, the way that a restaurant is defined as it would, there's not really a difference between a restaurant and a bar. Like, they're often one and the same thing. If there's some concern with that, that's where I guess a site-specific definition could come in.
Through you to the speaker, you're willing to strike out certain definitions. Would you be also willing to strike out restaurant as a potential establishment?
Mr. Manette?
Just to clarify through you, Mr. Mayor, you wanted to know if we would be prepared to remove a
Could you turn-
restaurant as a permitted use?
Mr. Manette, could you turn the microphone on, please?
Is it on?
It is?
Uh,
Okay, a
I
little
did-
closer then.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Just to clarify the question, are you asking to remove restaurant as a permitted use from the list of permitted uses?
Yes. Would your a client be willing to do that for this application?
I would think that he would not, because certainly a restaurant is a major potential use for the site, and we would certainly want to be able to have a restaurant on the premises. With respect to I guess, a bar versus a restaurant having a liquor license, I guess that definition could be different. Certainly, if a restaurant was to be there, most restaurants today, if they're going to serve dinner, for instance, or even lunch, they would want to have at least a license for beer and wine. And that, I don't believe that they would be considered to be a bar. That would be a restaurant with food services with a liquor license. So those are things I guess we can discuss when we're talking about definitions. But my understanding of the current definitions, it does not differentiate between a restaurant that would serve liquor and one that doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Councillor Thompson? Pardon me.
Thank you. Just for clarification, is there not already a restaurant there today?
Yes, there is. And it's
Yes.
And over the years there have been various types. There's restaurants that are sort of lunch restaurants, there are grills, there are bakery restaurants. I think the definition that the town is intending to go forward is more general than in the past. In the past there was a number of different types of restaurants. I think the intent of the new bylaw is to generalize the restaurant use.
I appreciate it, because certainly that was my recollection that there was one again. And again, through you, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, just earlier you said about with regards to some of the concerns about a second story and residential, and certainly you were happy to have those conversations, but did I hear you correctly that there's already one apartment there now?
No, under the current bylaw, it's a specific bylaw for the site, it allows one residential apartment as part of the use of the building that's there now. I think and this development goes back to the early 90s. So in those days, I guess the potential was that somebody might live above one of the stores or something of that nature. It's never been used for residential purposes to date.
Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned to the proponent, you mentioned that your client really doesn't have a desire to expand at this moment, and so I'm just wondering, is there really a need to make the changes to the bylaws as far as the rear and side setbacks? If the servicing part of it is the more important one, can we not just deal with that and maybe just forget about the setbacks?
Well, I think the one we would want to address now is the east side yard setback, because I'm not sure that that's in compliance now, so we want to make it legal. So I think if we're addressing that with staff, we can confirm that dimension and make sure that that one is accounted for. The reason we were providing for the flexibility is so if there was an intention to expand in the future, we would come in with a site plan that would then have some flexibility without having to go back for rezoning. But certainly, if there's a concern about, I guess, reducing the rear yard setback as an example, there's no issue with the west side yard because it's quite wide anyway. There's some flexibility there because it is wide. But with respect to the north, I think that's something we would keep, if it was required, we'd keep that at 7.5 for now. Because I think that's the one that's adjacent to the residential to the north, and it's probably the most important one with respect to the setback.
Thank you.
Councillor? Good. Any other questions? Councillor Perry?
I think ultimately what many of us are concerned about around the table is whether or not a business owner is able to survive and thrive. And in my view, what we're proposing here, what you're proposing, is setting them up to do, the best job of thriving that they can do and provide a few more uses. I do share some concerns around, ensuring that this tenant or future tenants don't become, rowdy and disturb the neighborhood. But I think on the whole, this will help a plaza become a little bit more successful, so I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I haven't been by the plaza. Is there a vacancy right now?
I believe there is, but that changes from day to day. And that's the issue with a small neighborhood commercial site like this, because you have a lot of mom and pop operations, you don't have large chains. Depending on the health of the owner, for instance, there may be, and I know we had a problem with one of the owners having a health problem, they had to close down. Sometimes that's temporary, sometimes it's more permanent, but that's why the flexibility is required to be able to move those changes fairly quickly.
Yes, and so in my mind, when someone comes before us to zone and expand the uses, it is my understanding that they're having difficulty subletting or getting a tenant, and so they're trying to expand their opportunities to fulfill that. And I think Councillor Perry spoke to that. I mean, we're here to, we'd like to assist and make sure that the property is occupied. It's to everyone's advantage. So I'm just grappling with, you're asking to the setback in the back, if there's any future plans, putting something on top, expanding the use, and if there's no specific plans coming forward, I'm just curious, can you be a little more specific with the plans or anything, or?
Well, as I said, through you, Mr. Mayor, the reason for request at this time for flexibility is to allow more for the uses to be widened. With respect to any future development, that would certainly be subject to a site plan application. One of the issues, of course, you'd have to deal with is parking with respect to any additions to the building. So at this point, we were trying to do a bylaw that was all-encompassing for the site to provide flexibility into the future, so that if there were changes, it would certainly be done through a further application. And the site plan application would have, of course, requirements for dealing with parking, dealing with any building changes, and it would go through a process. At this point, the official plan provides for 1,800 square meters, and we were just trying to be consistent with that on the site, so we would recognize that through the bylaw.
Okay. I noticed on our report that there were no comments from the residents on page 5, and so the comment I saw on the screen, perhaps I can direct it to staff. Where did that comment come from? Was it just added, was it more recent and you just brought it forward to sort of be current?
Mr. Mayor, through you, the comment came after the report was completed. As you know, the reports are completed ahead of time of the meeting, so I have received phone calls since that time, and that's where the comment came from.
So you had one comment saying no restaurant or bar?
I believe there were 2 that mentioned bars, 2 people.
Okay, but there already is a bar in operation there that I'm familiar with as well.
That's correct.
And it was confirmed. All right, well, I'm just, that's fine for now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments for the proponent? Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mayor Dow. I just want to confirm, Councilor Maracas asked you, just to make sure it's crystal clear, you mentioned that the side yard setback, you're asking for relief because the current side yard setback might not be currently within the bylaw?
That's correct. The east side yard setback is closer to the 4.5, and we have to take an exact measurement because the survey is rather old.
Right.
But we wanted to make sure that was in conformity. The west side yard is much greater than the minimum requirement now, and I understand the rear yard may be an issue because the residential is immediately to the north. So we would be prepared, if if that's not considered acceptable, we would take that out and go back to the 7.5 for that one, unless there was a plan came forward later that required a change, and then we would do that either through minor variance or through another application.
Thank you very much.
Councillors, and I'll close the public portion of the meeting. We'll put the motion on the floor. Thank you, Ms. Manette. Councillor Perry, you moving the motion? Thank you. Is there a second, please? Councillor Humphries, thank you. Comments or questions on the motion, Councillor Maracas? Councillor Tom?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just be brief. I think we do need to help out with the businesses and allow for, if they're struggling, to allow for, for them to be able to have some more uses. The part I'm just not comfortable with and I'm struggling with is the changes to the, the bylaw as far as the setbacks. If there's really no need for them, to me, I understand that, they'll have to come back with that site plan. But in effect, if we approve that, we've basically approved it, and we have no, at that point, we'll have no point to turn back. And so for me, unless there's an absolute need, I'd like to know what it is, and then I'd be able to approve that those bylaw changes. Otherwise, I'm fine allowing for more services for the area, more uses, but I'm not comfortable allowing those changes to the setbacks as of yet. So that's kind of where I stand right now. And through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Ramuno, I'm just struggling with what adult and intergenerational day center actually means.
Mr. Moon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Good question. I think that was taken. I believe that's an existing definition in our bylaw. It's something that we can report back on, and I'll have a discussion with the applicant. I did speak to him again earlier about if there's no need for that second-story residential, we'll eliminate that moving forward, and we'll also sit down with him to refine the actual additional commercial uses that they are requesting.
And that's fine. But if there is a need for the side setback, if it doesn't currently meet our standards, then that can be changed, and I have no issues with that. But it's just the ones that don't necessarily need to be changed at this moment. Thank you.
Councillor Tom, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Like Councilor Maracas, I have the same concerns, mostly, in fact, only with the setbacks, rear and side, and the extra story. But just so the public's clear and so we're clear, if we approve the changes as on in the report, through the site plan process, we really can't, once we approve the changes, they, as a right, have the ability to build within the envelope that we give them. Is that not correct?
Mr. Moon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
And the site plan process is really just perfunctory at that point, although you do have some ability to kind of change things at the margins. So my preference as well, going further to what Councilor Maracas was saying, would be to leave those as they are now, perhaps fixing any problems with the east side, as the delegate mentioned. And then that way, if they do want to put an extra floor on for residential, or they do want to increase the size of the building, they have to come back and the public is made aware, and it has to go through this council. So my preference, other than that, I'm fine with everything else, but the side, the rear, and the building height, for me, I think it would be better if we left them as is, and if they needed an application in the future, then they can come back to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. Just to be quick, when I first saw the report, my only real concern was the suitability of residential use above first story, which was captured by staff and addressed in the presentations, but I just want to make note of it so that when it comes back at a future general committee meeting, that staff will address that. But that's my big concern.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I agree with the comments at the table, except on transit corridors, I really would encourage a second story for residential use, but this isn't on a transit corridor. The other thing is, I've never seen, it's 12 years, I've never seen this term, adult and intergenerational day center. And I think it might be something that we see a lot in the future as the population ages. And this may be sort of a seniors day center. So I'm not opposed to that, but I would like to know what it is. Thanks.
Mr. Ramuno, maybe you could come back with a clearer definition for us. Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments for Mr. Ramuno at this point? Any other? If there's no other comments on the motion, I'll just call the vote then. All in favor? Contrary? That's carried. Thank you very much. Second item, please. Mr. Ramuno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Second item, this application has been before council at a previous public meeting. Our manager, Glenn Letman, will provide the presentation. The planner on the file, Drew McMartin, is away, so Glenn will provide the presentation. And I see the owner and their planning consultants are here as well to speak to the item.
Good evening,
Mr.
Mr. Mayor, members of council. The application being considered this evening is an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Carpino Construction, Inc. at 15283 Yonge Street. File numbers OPA 21504 and ZBA 21510. At the previous public planning meeting held November 25th, council passed a resolution that the staff report 1508 be received and the comments presented at that public meeting be addressed by Planning and Development Services and a report outlining recommendations and options at a future planning meeting. The subject lands are located at the northwest corner of Wellington Street and Yonge Street. The property has an area of approximately 1.1 hectares in size, which is about 2.7 acres, with a 82-meter frontage on Yonge Street and approximately 38 meters on Machel Avenue. Surrounding land uses include residential to the north and west, primarily single detached, with the exception of a 6-story apartment building. Commercial to the south in the form of a Dollarama and bank. East side is a 6-7-story mixed-use building being constructed directly across the road, and other surrounding commercial uses. Since the public planning meeting held in November, the owner has submitted 2 studies, a commercial needs critique prepared by Urban Metrics to respond to the comments made at the public meeting, and a preliminary environmental noise report prepared by Jade Acoustics. Oh, sorry. The subject lands are designated Aurora Promenade by the official plan, and more specifically the upper downtown designation within the Aurora Promenade secondary plan. An official plan amendment is required on the lands to allow what is proposed as a standalone, as well as first floor in the upper downtown, first floor residential in the upper downtown designation of the Aurora Promenade. This plan illustrates the land use designations, showing the upper downtown area in the darker mauve to the north, the downtown designation to the south,
and the surrounding land uses on Machel. The lands are currently zoned Central Commercial C2 by zoning bylaw 2213-78 as amended. The C2 zone allows a variety of commercial uses, primarily focused on downtown functions, but only permits residential dwellings above the first floor. 5-story height limit is allowed within the C2 zoning, provided it's stepped back above the second floor. An amendment to the zoning bylaw is required to rezone the subject lands to allow the stacked back-to-back dwelling units as a permitted use as proposed by the applicant. The applicant is proposing to rezone the properties from the Central Commercial C2 zone to the residential row dwelling residential C6 zone designation to allow the accommodation of 126 dwelling units. This map illustrates the existing zoning on the lands and in the surrounding area. The existing zoning shown as C2, as well as the lands to the south and the north. To the west, obviously, the lands are zoned R5 residential. A site plan application accompanied the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications, which propose 120 stacked back-to-back townhouse condominium dwelling units. There are 6 separate building envelopes proposed on the property. Each of the buildings would house between 16 to 24 units within each building. The proposed buildings are approximately 4 stories in height with flat rooftop terraces. 131 parking spaces are proposed on the site. Most of them are proposed below grade as garage type units or actual garage units, and 17 outdoor visitor parking spaces are also proposed. Access to the development is proposed from Machel Avenue by a 6-meter wide private condominium driveway. A second driveway is proposed directly to the south of that main access point to 16 underground parking spaces included within Block 1. The existing vehicular access point existing on Yonge Street would be removed, and so there's no vehicular access to Yonge Street. This plan illustrates the conceptual site plan layout showing the location of the various blocks. The single point of access shown to Machel Avenue to the left, and the Block 1, where I mentioned a second point of access would be permitted to the underground parking spaces within Block 1. This plan illustrates the conceptual building elevations along Yonge Street, which would be within the Block 5 area, as shown on this plan. And this plan illustrates the building elevations as they would be seen from Machel Avenue. The elevation at the the top left of this plan would show the garage access into the site and the general building elevation layout for that. This plan illustrates the colored perspective as it would appear from Yonge Street. There's 2 blocks shown within this elevation. Public comments that were received at the time of the public meeting and before the public meeting are listed in the staff report and are summarized here. I'll run down them quickly. Increase in stormwater runoff, that will impede drainage. Increased traffic along Yonge Street and Machel Avenue in Irwin. Emergency vehicle access to the subject lands. Enhance the pedestrian experience. The proposal does not represent the policies of the Aurora Promenade and the urban design strategy. Lacks opportunity to promote a mix of uses, particularly commercial. Machel is too narrow to handle the traffic. There's a lack of green space on the property. The building height is not in character with the area. The proposal is too dense. There's a lack of snow storage, unimaginative urban design, and it fails to illustrate the collaborative development properties to the north and the south. I should mention in those, the staff report before you this evening also identifies council's comments that came up at that public meeting, and there's a summary of staff's response to those comments, which are hopefully informative for council's consideration. Council is also aware that there's a proposed road widening at the northwest corner. This plan shows the Bank of Montreal directly at the northwest corner of Wellington and Yonge, and the Dollarama north of that. The area north of the brown line shown on this plan is where the subject property, Carpino, starts and is further north of that. The road widening plan that has been discussed with the region is shown here in approximate terms. The area of road widening does not really impact in any great way the area of the subject property. You can see it tapers off quite narrow to the north. The total amount of the width of the widening would appear to be about 1.5 meters. We're in discussion with the region with respect to that. I would also add that we have comments from Viva Next, who proposed to put in a Viva Next station in front of the subject property. It's not been determined exactly where that would go. They have made a request for a 4-meter, what they've called a widening, but in fact it's the distance between the edge of curb within the Yonge Street road allowance set back on the property. So that would include the boulevard and the sidewalk area. If I had to make an estimate in terms of the total amount of widening that would be across the frontage, it would be in the range of 1 to 1.5 meters. In terms of the staff's comments, we need to further evaluate the commercial needs report that's been submitted, review the design and location of the Machel Avenue access to the underground block and its proximity to the main access, submission of the Phase 2 environmental site assessment, and obviously the construction impact mitigation study that will be required at a future stage as part of the site plan approval application. In conclusion, staff will undertake a technical review of the subject application, addressing the outlined matters as well as the comments received at the public and council, and a comprehensive report with recommendations and options will be presented to a future general committee meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Glenn. Who's Mr. Given?
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Don Given. I'm a planner and pleased to be for you. Members of Council, this is an application that has been thoroughly scrutinized by your staff in response to issues that were raised in the previous public meeting and through comments that have been raised by some of the agencies. I believe it's before you now with a full set of responses to issues that were raised that have been done very carefully by your staff. Included in that is a review of the work that was done by Mr. Doug Anand from Urban Metrics. Mr. Anand is here today. In the event that any of you do have questions, I would prefer, if you do, that I would defer to him. He's the author of that report. What I'd like to ask you to think about is that this key corner in the town for some time has been the target of different ideas and different proposals. The one before you tonight has been, as I said earlier, very thoroughly scrutinized by your staff and others, but I also think it's a very good proposal for the corner. To my mind, this corner really works well as a residential corner, not as a commercial corner. The commercial uses that you have today are by and large south of the site. To suggest, as some have, that we try to incorporate commercial into this site is not workable from an economic point of view. To try to build commercial today at the scale that we're talking about, which would be ground floor related retail uses that are very dependent on pedestrian access, is problematic. With the scale of the construction costs, the development charges that we'd have, we can't bring commercial space on at a rate that would be competitive with existing space. It's just not practical. The alternative is to have residential at grade, which this is proposing. And as Mr. Anand has, I think, properly pointed out, that actually helps retail elsewhere. to have this residential in the area because it starts to create more market opportunity right on Yonge Street for the uses that already exist. And by not having additional retail here, we don't dilute that opportunity. It again gets focused elsewhere within the block. In terms of the access in and out of the site, I know it's a concern for the neighbors, but your transportation analyst has thoroughly looked at this and supports the approach that we are taking with the access coming in from the west. Any proposals for additional parking that were being considered do not seem to be the problems that my client have created and should not have to resolve. Those are problems that were created years ago by other actions, and they exist today. They should not be forced on my client for resolution. The elevations that you've seen, I know have been concerned to some of you because you feel that the character of the core area or what you would imagine to be complementary to the core areas has not been achieved with the buildings that are being proposed. I suggest that that is not the opinion that I would have, because I think when we get into dealing with what is heritage, it's always a difficult subject. There are so many interpretations of what that means and how it should be dealt with. And to put that into a context, your own consultants who did peer review this feel that the type of architecture that's being proposed is appropriate. It's complementary to the type of architecture that exists there, and it will fit in. So you have an outside opinion verifying that that is the situation. However, if you want to continue to discuss color, my client has said he understands that there's views that some like the color that he's proposed and that there are others that feel that perhaps some alternative color would be appropriate, and red has been suggested as an alternative. I actually have an elevation here that shows what it would look like in red if that's what you would like to think about. I think that in the end, if that's all it's coming down to, my client will be quite happy to work with you on those colors. The last thing I would like to make a comment on, though, is that at this, as I said earlier, this very important corner, it struck me when I was asked to sort of get involved in this that perhaps we can go a little bit further in doing something appropriate on the corner. And I'd like to suggest, and my client has agreed, that you consider adding to the request from the council that some public art be considered here, paid for by my client. It's something that I think is deserving in this location. It could add something that's distinctive in this general area that would help to reinforce your efforts to make your old downtown work. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of council.
Thank you, Mr. Given. I will now open it up to members of the public. If you care to come forward, please come to the podium. If you would give us your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, and there's a clock just in front of Linda here.
First, I'll say good evening, Mayor, Councillor, fellow residents and citizens of the town of Aurora. My name is Hugh Walker, and I'm an owner of property on Matchell Avenue, which is adjacent to the subject lands. I have read the report that the town staff have produced, PDS 16-014, and have a few questions and comments. First, a quick question. Is there a town minimum of required parking spaces for a development such as this, and if so, what is it? As expected from the last meeting in November, a lot of this report, PDS 16-014, covers traffic parking issues, although I would claim that the principal concerns of residents were misunderstood. True, there are veiled hints to those concerns. The report includes the longest paragraph subtitled Possible One-Way Traffic Along Matchell Avenue and Irvine Avenue, which is concerned solely with in-transit traffic volumes. It does, however, end with the following. Would not have a significant impact on local road traffic operations as there is residual capacity on both roads. This residual capacity assessment is repeated elsewhere in the report. Perhaps a reasonable assessment for in-transit traffic using the Young Wellington bypass, but not for parking issues, which current residents are constantly aware of. 2 paragraphs on page 10, albeit indirectly, also touch on this issue, namely lack of snow storage and subject lands are not accommodating overnight parking of adjacent, i.e. Matchell Avenue, property owners. The original plan stated that excess snow would be moved off-site through private contract, which I note has subsequently morphed into a snow storage issue. Well, even a cursory review of the plans shows there is no place to store excess snow except on the limited visitor parking areas, which would subsequently reduce the amount of parking for visitors to the site. The second paragraph details that there is no legal agreement, etc., that grants Matchell Avenue residents legal permission to enter park on subject lands. Well, I agree. However, turn that around. That is, the development residents will be perfectly within their legal rights to park on public roads, which is the crux of the matter. The closest visitor and additional resident parking for Block 1 and the western portions of Blocks 2 and 3 is Matchell Avenue. Reference in the report is made to on-street parking, including overnight on-street parking, has been permitted on Matchell Avenue since 2015. The impression I received from Ivy Hendrickson, manager of customer service at the town, was that special provisions were made solely for those homeowners who have no parking due to the various road reconstructions over the years, and that the town would be addressing this matter to find a more permanent solution for those individual cases. These special provisions, of course, didn't prevent other residents from parking on Matchell during the last winter. I believe none were ticketed, so it would appear that the view expressed in this report is the more accurate one. Addressing the commercial needs critique submitted by the developers hired consultants Urban Metrics, who state as their first reason that the site has a long history of commercial failure. However, further down the same page, the town report notes that a supermarket was constructed in the mid-1960s which served the community until the late 2000s, which being a 40-year period would appear to belie the claim of commercial failure. Certainly, Liquidation World was probably not a viable venture at the location. Revitalizing the downtown core of Aurora as proposed in town planning documents is a complex and multifaceted problem, but simply building more residents is, I believe, not the only solution. Considering the layout of Aurora, the young Wellington area is the core of the core, and extra special attention must be paid, otherwise future town plans will come to naught. As presently proposed, people will still need to travel by car or public transportation outside the area for all their primary shopping needs. And then finally, to repeat what I said at the last presentation to Council on this development, over the years, the town of Aurora has done several major road upgrades to Matchell Avenue. This has resulted in a substantially raising of the road level, with the effect that mine and adjacent properties on either side have been denied the ability to easily add parking space. If the town approves of this proposed development proceeding, I have some suggestions as to a possible resolution that would satisfy all parties and cause only the most minimal of impact. I would therefore be most grateful if the mayor or another member of council could recommend to me an individual at the town who would be in a position to guide such solution through the process, if you decide to proceed. Council members and fellow residents, thank you very much for the opportunity to address this meeting. Thank you.
Well done, sir. Right on the time. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Glenn Payne. I live at 63 Machel Avenue. Pardon me. I won't be as long as you, but a couple of thoughts I had was, and again, with the traffic concerns. I pull in and out of Irwin or Machel every morning and evening, and I have a long truck and a long trailer attached, and no matter which way I go, it's very, very busy. So one of the issues that is always a concern is the parking in front of the Monders food store, and it's the delivery trucks in the morning, or it's the staff that park there, and they're there every day. One thing that we could consider is a no parking zone from the corner of Machel and Wellington further back onto Machel, maybe 25 meters or something. And that will give enough buffer zone for oncoming traffic, if we're not looking at a one-way traffic situation, to move to the side, to going southbound. Because as of right now, if they're trying to avoid a car or a truck, they're already in the middle of the lane. So there's been many times where I've had to hang tight onto Wellington to try and turn north onto Machel, and it's just it's a disaster, really. So I'm trying to swing on my truck and trailer on the curb, and there's people, and it's not very good. So also, I thought that potentially going back to the homeowners that don't have driveways, that we could look at designated street parking for them. It's their spot. So if they have a spot, or they could have one or two, and it could be called permit parking or whatever the case is, but that's their spot. And if somebody's there, somebody else is in there, a call is made and a ticket is issued or it's towed away. And again, to go even further, potentially permit parking only on Irwin and Machel altogether. Once we get into tennis season and soccer season, it's a parking lot on those two streets. It really is, because we can only park on one side of the road anyway. Also, another big concern of mine and others is seeing as this building is not going to have elevators, it's not going to be conducive to the seniors unless they're going to be buying on the ground floor, because they're not going to be climbing 3 and 4 stories to get their groceries from their car or wherever and take it up to their suites. And I can imagine what the cost of these units are going to be. Like, we're right in the heart of Aurora. We're very expensive. So I believe that this is eventually just going to become an investment property for many people. And it's going to be a rental property, ultimately. So one thing we have to be concerned of is pride of ownership. Rusty bicycles, toys strewn about, so on and so forth. You get the picture. So anyway, that's my thoughts, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I wasn't going to get up tonight. I thought everything would be settled, I just listen. But there are some things that concern me. I live at number 17 Irwin Avenue, so I'm on the north boundary of this new subdivision, and my backyard backs onto it.
Could you give us your name too, sir, please?
I beg your pardon?
Could you give us your name as well?
John Bridgman.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. During the discussion, as the last time we were here, we mentioned shadowing. This building, how much shadow is it going to cascade onto, particularly my backyard, right? So I didn't hear anything. Did the study actually go into that? Did they actually find out how much shadow is going to be cost, especially in the winter months when the sun is low? Am I going to see the sunshine? That's a concern for me, my family, and everybody on that street where those homes are going to back onto. The other thing is, they need a new fence. They're going to put this property up. We've got a 60, 70-year-old fence there. It needs to be all replaced. And is the developer going to replace the fence around the subdivision? And what kind of fence are they going to do? It needs to be done. The other thing is, during the construction, I don't think we're going to stop this. I think it's probably going to go ahead. I'm concerned about, there should be some commercial activity on Yonge Street. When the gentleman here says some artwork, I think the name for that is graffiti, and we don't need it. We need to have those small commercial shops, nail shops, restaurants, small shops that bring people there daily for lunch. We have a building across the street with 600 some odd units in it. How many people we got there? 800, 900 people are going to be there. Where are they going to go for these things? They should be commercial shops there. It is viable. Yeah, a big store is not going to work. We know that. We're not talking about big stores. We're talking about small, independent stores for people to create jobs. We're not doing it. The other thing is, during the excavation of their property, they were in and out moving big trucks out on Machel. Okay, fine. They moved it really quickly. But I guess one day they got backed up, so they decided to line up 8 trucks along Irwin. Yeah, I sent the picture to the mayor's office, and I sent the picture to enforcement. All right. You couldn't drive up and down, so it upset me. So I brought my car out and parked it on the road. Now nobody gets by. You know, this isn't right. So anyway, my point about this, during the construction, I'd like to see a sign go up, big enough so the drivers can see it, that there's no heavy construction trucks on Irwin. Let's do it all through one end, the other end off Machel, but let's leave Irwin open for the people who live there and on Machel that can use it to get in and out. Let's not have a lineup of dump trucks and other vehicles there restricting the access onto Yonge Street. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Martin Slepkov. I live at 48 Machel Avenue, which happens to be right at the base of Irwin. Aside from the difficulty for me and my wife coming back and forth during the day to our home and the construction trucks mentioned just a moment ago, it definitely was a real problem. And the town seemed to take some sort of effort to sort of police that or ask the developer to police that. So let's pretend that the building goes through and you make sure that there's traffic available Irwin to Machel, Yonge, and Wellington. The number one issue going forward from today and as experienced is the delivery trucks at Modders. And so that can't be said enough times. I'd have to ask council to review why they would have police officers at the base of Irwin at Machel, in particular during the winter time, and the sign that says, as you're traveling south on Yonge, you can't turn right onto Irwin until after 9:30. Yet, police cars were stationed the first few winters that we lived there, and we've been there 3 years, trying to ticket people turning right on Irwin from Yonge Street before Wellington. Why would they do that? Probably because during winter, more and more traffic is stopped at Wellington and Yonge, which I believe is the worst and busiest intersection in Aurora, which will only get worse with your development. So there's something about the traffic flow at Yonge and Wellington, not to mention the light thing that you have there for traffic. You know, if you go through a red light, you get a picture. It's only going to get worse. And so the other part of that is if you live on either of those streets and you want to turn left on Yonge from Aurora, from Irwin, therefore turning left to go north on Yonge, try doing that at the best of times without getting killed. It's because of the elevation of Yonge coming down to Wellington and the current home that's going to be renovated to something else that is going on, very dangerous. So just turning left there now is a problem. Add people wanting to turn right to avoid the increased traffic at Wellington and Yonge is a problem. And then the disaster turning left off of Machel onto Irwin, turning left on Wellington to go to Yonge Street can only be worse. At the end of the day, it's a traffic nightmare from a safety perspective. Does the traffic flow on an average day accommodate this development? Possibly, but add winter, you got a real problem.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Rosemary Verge, and I live at 9 Irwin. I don't know if this question really relates to this application, but in the original report, the owner said they had approached neighbors to the north and south, to the north and south about collaborating with this or selling. heard a rumor that the property has been sold to Carpini, and that I'm just wondering, do they plan to develop that new site where Supreme Collision and the vacant lot is to add to this development? I know that it would be future, but I'm just wondering, this may affect that or that may affect this.
If there's no one else at this point, then I'm going to go back to, I'll go first to Mr. Ramuno with respect to some of the questions, and I'll go to the proponent. So, Mr. Ramuno, traffic concerns, the snow storage, which I think has also been addressed in the report, the amount of parking spaces. One gentleman's concern was shadowing in his backyard, fencing, management of construction traffic. That certainly came up when the excavation was going on. Interesting, there's a concern with respect to, I guess, traffic management at Monders with respect to delivery vehicles, which is certainly pertinent to the issue overall, but not specifically to the development, although it does factor in. So if you could help with those, and I'm going to go to the proponent.
Certainly, to you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to traffic, obviously the applicant submitted a traffic study. It's been reviewed by our staff. The region's also reviewed the application. So from a traffic standpoint, there have been no concerns identified. The proposed development and the parking that would be generated would be at an acceptable level. With respect to parking, the proposal is providing sufficient parking on site between the underground and the surface parking. Our official plan minimum requirement is for one parking space per new residential unit. The proponent is proposing 134 underground spaces and 17 visitor, I believe, so it exceeds the minimum requirement. It's closer to the maximum requirement identified in our official plan. With respect to fencing, I can't recall if there is fencing proposed, but I'll leave that to the applicant to address. Parking on Machel, as the residents have indicated, it's an existing situation. We have been allowing parking on Machel for a number of years. With respect to the actual design of the building, from an urban design standpoint and the massing of the 6 blocks, as Mr. Givens mentioned, we have had our control architect, who are the authors of the promenade plan, review the plan from an urban design standpoint and massing, and they provided their comments, and they're positive. They have good things to say about the design and the massing. It won't have an impact on the surrounding property. With respect to construction management plan, I mean, that is a question that we get on just about every application. It is something that our staff and our engineers will work with the applicant moving forward prior to development, and ensuring that we do have a construction management plan in place. And then what that means is we identify, the access points and issue permits for where access will be coming and going from, and we'll have that in place, as well as the applicant will be required to operate within our hours of operation as per our bylaw, and ensure that the streets are kept clean of dust and debris, etc. The collision auto body, that is not part of this application. It has not been included in this application. The owner had approached the owners of collision auto body and the commercial properties to the south. In the past, they were not interested in selling, so the collision auto body is not part of this application. As from what I understand, it has not been sold to this applicant. Not sure if there's anything else, Mr. Mayor.
I think that covers most of it right now. And just quickly, for the gentleman who was wanting to know where he could send his traffic solution or his parking solution, you can send it to anyone here, and we'll forward it to staff, or you can just send it to Mr. Letman, who is the planner on the project, and he'd probably be the best person. I'm sure Glenn would. Glenn, hold your hand up. Be even better, he's holding it up with a business card. Mr. Given.
thank you again. Starting with the last point on the property to the north, my client has not acquired that property. I can confirm that. There are rumors out there that we've heard too, but to this point, we don't know any more than you know. With respect to the idea of sort of dealing with the parking and how that might, I heard some very good suggestions. It sounded like they're all in the town's court, not in my client's realm to deal with. And I'd like to, where we can, work with everybody. Fencing's not an issue. Appropriate fencing where necessary will be certainly a part of this to deal with it from a good neighbor's point of view. I believe the shadowing was addressed through your own architectural review. That should not be an issue for the gentleman that lives on Irwin Street. And traffic coming through Irwin Street as a bypass to the problems that you've had historically at the corner of Wellington and Yonge, I think are being addressed in part by the widenings that are being proposed that were spoken to by Mr. Ramuno and Mr. Letman earlier, so that that should help with the right turn motions that are going westbound onto the southbound, westbound to get to the or to get further to the west. I didn't see anything else that I thought needed redress, but happy if there were some questions to take those from the council.
Excuse me, before I do that, Mr. Given, I'll go back to the public one more time. Would you just quickly comment on because there's been a lot of discussion around commercial, whether or not it's viable or is not. Would you or perhaps the consultant care to speak to that? I think we would find that
I would
helpful.
like to speak to it because within our own shop we do a lot of retail work, but Mr. Anand can also speak. But my own experience has been that the smaller units are very difficult to build and make competitive with today's construction and development charge costs. But more importantly, what we find is that the tenants that are in them are usually not chain tenants. They don't have a covenant that you can rely on, and as a result of it, as you heard earlier from Mr. Monet, they come and go. There is no kind of long-term financial security that they bring ahead of time like a major chain would. And therefore, you can't use and rely on the space as something that you can get a mortgage on. The space is seen to be actually a liability from an investor's point of view because you cannot use that as space that you could see like you could a residential unit being sold, and you only build these units once you've got pre-sale. The retail doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Retail is often seen to be a public use. It's not. It's private. It's very competitive. It's hard to work. And in these times, we are in an overstored condition. There's a tremendous amount of supply out there that's happened as a result of a combination of circumstances, but in part of it is the electronic purchasing of goods has changed a lot of the shopping patterns. And what we have left are a lot of personal service type uses. There can only be so many estheticians on Yonge Street and haircutters on Yonge Street that they are not going to be the kind of store that's going to make this development work. So we would like to park that. We think that we've given it as much attention as we need to properly explain the dilemma that it places on a development like this. You want to do something on this corner. Other retail has not been able to work. Now a residential alternative seems to be the logical alternative for this site. I would like to Mr. Anand to just speak to it for a few minutes, so excuse me.
Your Worship, members of council, my name is Doug Anand. I am the author of the commercial feasibility study, the commercial needs study. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that Mr. Given said. Obviously, there is an issue in terms of trying to attract retailers in a viable financial sense to a property like this. I think many of the higher density or mixed use projects that have commercial on the ground floor have difficulty maintaining their tenants. I think one of the things we found, which is key, is that you have a fairly significant vacancy rate in the downtown currently. And by adding additional, whether it be 10 or 20,000 square feet of additional retail of the same type, which tends to be very local serving and serving to a large degree the local community, by having that, you're actually creating additional competition for the existing tenants that already exist in your downtown, which currently are pretty fragile and you know, pretty important to the worst thing you want to have are vacant storefronts along Yonge Street. So with injecting additional population that is not going to support the retail on the ground level of this, but support your other retail uses in the downtown, I think is a pretty important addition. And one thing we always recommend in downtowns, particularly in this province where they are suffering and the tenants are suffering, is to inject more customers. And more customers that can walk to the existing facilities is a pretty important thing that you have to consider, and that's one of the reasons we wouldn't want to create additional competition by adding it on the ground floor of this project. So I welcome any questions you might have further to that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So just before I go back to members of the public, if there's any further questions, there was a comment, there's a 600-unit building across the road. That building is actually 94 or 95 units, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. Mr. Ramuno, could you, just before I go back to the public, please speak to the issue on Machel? There are 2 or 3 houses that do not have driveways, and so what allowance, if any, has been made with respect to parking?
Certainly, to you, Mr. Mayor. And we heard that comment, and we've identified that in the report with respect to the history of the Machel Road resurfacing. And our records show that back in 1976, there was the road reconstruction of Machel, and a dry stone retaining wall was added, and the actual street elevation on the west side was raised by just over 2 feet. More recently, back in 2007, that stone retaining wall was replaced by a concrete wall, and the road was repaved, but the elevation was not raised. So our understanding is that those 3 homes on Machel, on the west side of Machel, probably lost their, if they had a driveway, lost that opportunity back in 1976. It's unfortunate, as we've heard, it is an existing condition. What we have done is to allow the parking along Machel, and obviously we will be willing to sit down with some of those residents to hear what options they have. And, you know, I heard the parking permit option. That's something that obviously we can consider, so we'll continue those discussions, Mr. Mayor. And the other thing that I did forget to mention, but Mr. I think Givens touched on, and Glenn did, notwithstanding the application itself, this current application doesn't warrant the right turning lane. It's a direction that we did receive from council, and so we are currently proceeding to try and secure the appropriate road winding with the assistance of York Region in order to implement that right turn lane on Yonge Street. And again, that really affects the properties south of this application, but that is a direction that we received from council previously, and we are proceeding to deal with that.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. I'll go back to open it up to members of the public. If any further comments from anyone who has already spoken or a new person? And I will ask you to give us your name and address again, please.
John Bridgman, 17 Irwin Avenue. Just to address the commercial aspect, as I know we're beating a dead horse here, but the new building across the street, I believe they have commercial on the lower end of it. They seem to comply with the town's promenade to have commercial there. It looks to me like the developer here wants to build the homes, wash his hands, and leave. Yeah, there may be a little bit extra work to getting some stores in there, but that's not our problem. That's his problem. Do the job and get it done. You'll get people in there. And I know there's not 600 people across the street, but there's got to be at least 600 people between the 2 developments. We've got 126. If there's 2 people in each one, we've got 250 people there. We've got another 200 people across the street. It's got to be. And what happens when Christmas comes along? We got all these people coming in. We got 126 families. 50% of them have guests. Where are they going to put their cars? We're talking 50 cars. It's not going to fit. It's not going to work. So let's tear down one of the units so they only have 5, and they can put in a parking spot. What the heck? You know, let's not build something and have them leave and leave us their problem. Let's fix the problem before they build it. Thank you.
Martin Slepkov, 48 Machel Avenue. I'm probably pushing a rope uphill. I have no idea about the politics of the building being proposed, but I can't understand, given the importance of what you were trying to do on the block north of Irwin and the Hall of Fame and the Doctor's House, Hillary House, the park that you were trying to do, the utilizing of the space next to the auto body shop, you know, keeping the Bank of Montreal at the corner. If you can't figure out a way to make that corner a complete development to accommodate what you want to do long-term with the promenade, this isn't going to work. I think John is right that they're going to build, they're going to leave. It's not going to be to the town's best interest long-term.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Any other members of the public? Any comments? I will then ask members of the council any comments either to Mr. Lettman or to the proponent. Please, Councillor Peary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be the last time I think I talk about commercial uses on this site. I know we've spoken about the traditional commercial uses that we all think about. Has there been any thought given to a live workspace? It would still allow the proponents to sell the properties, but let's say somebody wants to open up a cafe, they live upstairs, they go downstairs in the morning, they do their baking, open the doors up, cafe, somebody wants to, you know, sell some clothing, they live upstairs, they go down in the morning, they can cut their patterns, they can sew up the clothing, they can sell it if they want. Live workspaces, I think, would be a happy medium. Has there been any thought given to that? Because I think it accomplishes, I think the intents of the promenade plan, but it doesn't detract, or it doesn't have the same negative problems that you would with the traditional retail. Because, you know, I do disagree with one of the commenters here tonight. I don't think we need another nail salon in the downtown core. But other than that, you know, I think that there could be retail that could work if we're willing to think outside of the box. So I'm wondering if that's something that we've given any thought to, and it.
Mr. Given, or?
Okay, I first of all, through you to the council, through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. Number one, I'm not sure whether the developer has considered the live-work situation. In my experience in other communities, I know like in the city of Waterloo is very keen on live-work. It tends to create sometimes some sort of a hodgepodge of uses, sort of going in and out. I think the key thing that we have to deal with here is the fact that your downtown currently is fragile, and whether it's live-work commercial or whether it's traditional commercial, it's still commercial that will compete with the existing downtown core. And I think, you know, even the storefronts on the east side of Yonge Street, just south of Wellington on the east side, are you know, that's not something you want to see in your downtown. So I think if additional people are injected into the downtown core that can walk south of Wellington to those stores, that creates additional market to potentially attract a user of that space which is currently vacant. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor.
I think for the most part it does. It's not feasible. I've heard again. You know, I don't have any major concerns with the development. I like what I'm seeing. Overall, I would like to see more commercial. I think we all would, but I think there's been a planning justification put forward that demonstrates why maybe this site doesn't work best. So.
Other comments for the developer, please, for the ORF staff? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mayor Dodd. Just one question to the proponent, perhaps Mr. Gibbons can answer. What there's been some conversation around the construction management plan, the impact while it's being constructed to the surrounding neighborhood. Is there a sense of the timelines in terms of how long will it take for this project to be completed? Are we talking a year, less, more?
The construction management plan is a standard requirement that we'd expect you to impose, and it will properly define hours of construction, movement of traffic, storage issues, parking for construction workers. Those things will all be dealt with through that plan. In terms of the time for construction, you start first with the time for marketing, and you need to, in my experience, have about 70% of the units sold before you would actually enter into a construction program. And in this market, product like this is probably going to sell very quickly. It's going to be well priced. It's going to fit into a market niche that hasn't been served with the larger units that we've been building or the smaller apartments that have been built in other locations. So it's going to find, I think, a very quick market uptake. So let's assuming you've got 126 units, you sell 100 of them within a year or so, so you're going into ground in a year. A construction program like this is probably a couple years to build. So you've got 2 years of construction to get into and out of the site.
Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Tom.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, I just have a quick question. Someone mentioned elevators earlier. Is that typical of this design? Sorry. In terms of, I'm just interested. I'm sorry about that, Mr. Gibbons.
I didn't mean to walk away from you.
I won't be offended. Just in terms of elevators, no elevators in the stack building. It's just separate stairs, I guess, or separate stairs.
Yes, if I could, Your Worship. The stacked townhouses do not have elevators, and it's one of the features that makes them limited in their market to some segments of the market. But it also helps with keeping the construction costs down. And that goes to the marketability of the units and the price point that they come in at.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw, and thank you, Mr. Gibbon, for coming out. I just wanted to know if you're aware, I mean, I'm sure you are, this is I hesitate to say, the flagship corner of Aurora. It's the oldest part of our town. It's where the town grew out from. Those of us who are concerned with the heritage, the built heritage of Aurora, certainly this is where our town began, and certainly the heritage neighborhoods kind of flow outward from here. We have a designated neighborhood driving directly to the east, northeast, across Yonge Street, and certainly we have a heritage area to the south and southeast as well. I know the first dwelling was built in 1795 at Catherine and Yonge, and the first commercial went in the corner in 1804. And that's why it was called Machel's Corner. So anyways, I only mention this to you because you did mention, and I've had discussions previously with the heritage or the treatment of, not necessarily the design, but the treatment of the building, color of the brick, that kind of thing, and also your public art. And I just wanted to know, and you mentioned it earlier, just to clarify for the public and for the council, that you will work with our staff to make sure that this building, which is right on the shoulder of our historic downtown, fits in, or at least blends in, with the heritage that we have directly to the south. So I just wanted to know if you could comment and elaborate on that, if possible.
I am aware of it. It's certainly documented already in the staff report, the history of this corner, including the use as a blacksmith shop and the previous oak that had been cut down and now will have to be somehow replaced in a minor form. But yes, we're aware of that, and happy to work with everybody that has a view that we can coalesce around to sort of what that means. If it's naming the corner somehow, Machel's Corner, we've heard that that may be part of what we're talking about just for the project. Who knows where that takes us, but there certainly is a willingness on my client's part to deal with that.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mayor Dawn. Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Thank you.
Are there any other comments for the proponent or for staff with respect to Mr. Lightman with respect to the presentation? Being none, I'll close the public portion of the meeting, and I'll ask someone to put the recommendation on the floor so we can discuss it, please. Councillor Perry, thank you. Councillor Thompson, second. Speakers, please, to the motion. Calling the vote. Councillor Maracas, Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I'm still not thrilled as far as the commercial piece, I'm not going to beat it to death because we've been through it. So I agree. I am disappointed that there won't be commercial there. I think that we could have possibly worked at it. I know that the proponent did put in a strong effort in looking into locating some commercial there, so I appreciate that aspect of it. I agree with a lot of the facts as far as parking on Machel and Erin. I think that's something that, you know, Mr. Mayor, you pointed out that that's something we need to deal with on the policy side later on, as far as doing some permit parking and looking at that corner at Monders and doing that. And I think we can do that to alleviate those concerns. I do have some of the concerns, as Councillor Tom does, as far as the heritage, so I'm looking forward to any site plan that comes back. You know, this is a corner that we have identified for intensification. While I am disappointed as far as the commercial aspect of it, I am reluctantly going to vote in favor of this application to move forward. So,
thank you. Councillor Tom, Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. And yeah, I mean, this is a corner that is identified as a corner for intensification. I know that at the last public meeting, we did speak a lot about the commercial use. I'm reluctant as well, but you know, you can't get everything all the time. And I don't want to be a dead horse either on that issue. Like my comments before to Mr. Given, I really want to stress the heritage as well. I don't think it's something that's going to be restrictive. I just think it's something that staff, and I want to urge staff to work with the applicant to satisfy at least this council, to make sure that we're keeping with the neighborhood. And but I did have a couple of questions for Mr. Ramuno. So you mentioned in your response to some of the residents' concerns, shadowing. I'm not sure if it had come up in the report, but your staff will look into that and report back if this goes to GC. Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we've already looked at it, and we've had our control architect look at it, yes. But we'll when we do come back with a report with a recommendation, we'll address all the issues that we, again, have heard this evening and previously.
Because that may alleviate the gentleman's concerns who lives on Irwin, just to give him some confidence that it won't be undue to his property. And then the other question, I think I know the answer to this already, but just again to be clear, are there any site-specific exceptions in the proposed zoning? I don't think there is, but could you confirm that in the zoning they're asking for, that there's any site-specific exceptions to that?
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, in this instance, because of the existing C2 commercial zone, with developments like this, we will be customizing or tailoring the zoning to this development, the site plan. And so we will identify any exceptions in the future report. I don't have that list in front of me, but again, just to clarify, the existing commercial C2 zone does permit, 6-story structures.
I guess what I'm getting at there is, is this going to be, I know that this might be quite unique and a specialized zoning, and I can appreciate that, but perhaps illustrate to us that comparative to other similar sites in town, that it's following the kind of garden variety rules that we have set out in our official plan. Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys, please.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I think for me, in terms of commercial on the first floor, I'm okay that we don't, I hope it doesn't offend anybody, I'm okay that we don't have any. I really don't like seeing the closed businesses on Yonge Street. I worry about that a lot, and I think adding a residential in the area allows for the current businesses to just become stronger and more robust. That's what I'm hoping for. So, I mean, I love seeing commercial, but I'm just worried about the type of commercial downtown, and if we can try to support those businesses. I like the fact that they're not high rises. I like the fact that it's not a 6-story condo. I'm really thrilled that we're going to have some looking like they're going to be beautiful town homes at the corner of Yonge and Wellington, and hopefully blend in a lot nicer to the area homes around it. I am worried about parking and traffic, but it is our problem. We need to fix that. I love the suggestion made by a resident in terms of those homes that don't have driveways, that we can build some permanent parking for them, no parking for others, really secure parking for the residents of Machel and Irwin. Really important. So I think we can do a lot of work there, and that's up to council to do that. So the developer can do their part. We need to do ours for sure. And I really like the heritage aspect. For me, as you know, I love heritage, anything heritage of Aurora, and my mother-in-law used to frequent that area a lot and knows it as Machel's Corners, still refers to it as Machel's Corners. So is anything that the developer can do to celebrate our history there. I heard that you would. Maybe call it Machel's Corners, the towns of Machel's Corners, whatever it is, that we can always come back to what that corner was, and some tribute art, not graffiti, absolutely not, but some of the nice tribute artwork that can be done to represent our town would be fantastic. So I'm looking forward to seeing the concerns addressed. Sounds like they have been, and you know, some nice fencing. I agree with the owner at Irwin that we need to get some really nice fencing there as a good neighbor. That we make that very nice for those backyards against the new development. That we really look after them that way, for sure. So for me, I'm going to support the development this evening, and looking forward to making sure that the concerns are addressed while we're working through this.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, this is a tough, well, I mean, there are all these large plans are tough, and especially, you know, this one, as Councillor Tom said, this is right in the oldest part of Aurora. So this, you know, you certainly want to make the right decision. I think I can speak for everyone here that, you know, when you make a decision, you have to make decisions based on the long term, not on the short term. Because if we made decisions on the short term, then you'll see a lot of Band-Aids going up. You know, I certainly hope that this development will mimic the development that we're going to see in the former Timberlane complex with Brookfield, where the residents and the builders work closely together to build something that everyone can be proud of. You know, in the year and a half that this council has been together, you know, we've seen several plans. We've seen some that you know, we agreed on quite quickly, some that are still pending, and we know where all the roads go. And given that we know what the provincial policies are, the regional, and as well as our own official and strategic plans, you know, we have to think for the long term. And you know, I find myself going to Yonge Street and going to some of these small businesses, even though can I get that certain product or service better somewhere else? Yes. But I find myself wanting to pay a little bit of a premium at some of the local stores because I want to support Auroran businesses. And you know, as much as I would like to see some residential or commercial business on that corner, you know, I'm of the view that, you know, we need to have customers available to give the business. And right now, as indicated, it's in a fragile corridor where I find that there's a lot of turnover, and I don't want to give money to these businesses because I feel sorry for them, but I want to give it to them because they provide the best service, and you know, the only way they can get that is if they have that critical mass and have more residents to provide for. And you know, given that there is a trend towards higher density, especially in these larger corridors like Yonge and Wellington and Bayview and so forth, you know, that's where the trend's going. You know, I'm very empathetic to residents during the transition because certainly in any development, whether it's 6 months or a year or 2 years or whatever it is, it's definitely an inconvenience, and there's no way around that. But I do feel, if everyone's concerned about property values, I have no doubt that once this construction goes up, the property values will escalate with it. We talk about the cultural precinct, and we're looking at, we're talking about a vibrant community where people are walking on sidewalks. If you do drive around Yonge Street late at night, I don't see that many walkers or pedestrians at all. And I think it would make for a better community when there's more people on the streets walking and providing business. And I think that's where it's going to be down the road. And it's unfortunately that in the short term, during the building process, there's going to be inconvenience and there's going to be some hardships. But overall, I think the builder has demonstrated some level of flexibility and willing to listen. And so for that reason, I think I will vote for approval of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Thompson, Gardner, Abel.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. The town adopted the Promenade Plan back in 2010, and it put forward a vision for the area. And as Councillor Tom mentioned, I mean, that intersection certainly is a primary gateway, something that we really wanted to, consolidate and develop. And I know there have been efforts to have those conversations to try and develop something similar along to the lines that were presented in the Promenade Plan, but it's a challenge. It's multiple pieces to a puzzle that have not been able to be aligned, and so I think it's important the residents know that there were efforts and conversations to try and make it happen, but unfortunately it couldn't. And so what we have before us is an application. The proponent, the developer, is well known to the town. They worked with the town in the past. They have a good track record of addressing the concerns of the municipality and of the residents in the area, and I'm confident they'll continue to work well with Mr. Ramuno and the town to make sure that the areas and the concerns are addressed. And so I'm very appreciative of that. I think that the concerns that the residents expressed this evening are similar to the ones that we heard last time, and Mr. Ramuno's addressed in the report, and I'm sure that coming forward to the future GC meeting, that again, traffic and parking will still be part of those concerns, but we'll have some more information. Like Councillor Humphreys, I'm not overly concerned about the commercial piece. With townhomes, I've had a fair bit of experience in seeing some of these developments that succeed and some don't, and when they don't, it doesn't bode well. You look at in Markham, there's some areas that have these kind of townhomes, and there is a high vacancy with them, and so again, it presents a negative image for the town, and so it is a challenge. And I do agree that some of the comments that it's a tough sell for those small 8, 7, 600 square foot units, and so I'm not overly concerned about the commercial piece. Again, if it means greater success for our existing business owners, then great. I'll move forward with it. So. What we have in front of us sort of does adhere to the general principles, what we've adopted in the Promenade Plan in terms of this is what we wanted for intensification. Right? And that's the general principle we identified in our official plans and the Promenade Plan. And so, I look forward to the report to address those concerns that were expressed tonight at the future GC meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Abel. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I have a concern that we've got 126 units that are 2- and 3-bedroom units. So through you, Mayor Daw, to Mr. Ramuno, 17 visitor parking spots. I mean, that's one of Councillor Marakis's parties. So where are we going? Where are we going? So where are we going to put all these extra people? Especially at Christmas when we've got snow.
Mr. Ramuno?
I guess I'm not getting invited to anything.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the parking, based on the information we have, we're confident that they're providing sufficient parking on site for this type of use, these type of units in this location. Council is aware that we undertook a parking study review for our downtown back in 2009, which led to the adoption of the Promenade Plan, and we revisited our parking rate, and we've got new parking standards for downtown, and that's a minimum of one space. We've implemented that since that time, and it has been working. One thing to keep in mind is, I mean, again, this is not your traditional ground-related residential out in a subdivision. These are different type units. They're stacked townhomes. The household sizes, I mean, these are geared to different demographic. They will have more than one space per unit. Sufficient on, surface visitor parking space, 17. So we're confident based on, the work that we've completed with our parking review and our promenade plans and the traffic work that we've seen and parking studies that we've seen, not only in this situation, but other situations within our promenade, that the parking rate is appropriate for this type of development in this location. Other thing to keep in mind is, its location. It is on the Yonge Street Transit Corridor. It's not that far either from the GO station. The one key thing here with our official plan is the vision, create that critical mass, get people living downtown, to be able to walk to some of the commercial, opportunities up and down Yonge Street. So I don't have any concern, and nor do our traffic staff, with the traffic or the parking supply on the site.
Councillor?
Thank you, and I don't have a concern with the residential parking that we've set up in this area, but I certainly think I do have a problem with accommodating visitors, so I hope you're right with that. How does, and maybe this will come back in the GC, the traffic control plan for the proposed development, how is that going to be maintained? How is the plan going to be put in place, and how is it going to be maintained? Who's going to maintain it? How are the residents not going to be affected?
Mr. Mayor?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the construction management plan, it's something that with any development, our staff, our engineering staff will sit down before permits or construction occurs. We'll sit down with the applicant to devise a plan, primarily number one being, where the truck traffic will be entering from, and so we will approve the entrance locations, sometimes the regions involved as well, and we will work with them and actually have a plan with respect to, where the trucks will be coming from, where they could park. So we will have that. They will have an understanding from us with respect to where we want construction traffic directed. In addition, we do have our inspectors who will go out during construction and make sure that they are following that plan. And again, the roads are clear of debris and dust. But we do that with every development.
Councillor?
So there'll be a plan in place, and it'll be enforced, and if the residents have an issue, they will know who to call to make sure it's enforced. The same question with the noise control plan and the dust control plan. I think you said the streets are going to be kept clean. So there's going to be a plan in place for noise and dust control? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Romano.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, with respect to dust and keeping the streets clean, obviously our inspectors will go out there. Obviously if we do get complaints, we will call the developer to ensure that those roads are kept clean of debris. And, of course, some of these developers who are doing business in town, they also take the initiative as well to ensure that the roads are clear of dust and debris.
So the residents and the developers have heard this concern and your answer to that. Thank you. How wide is the sidewalk going to be on Yonge Street?
Through you, Mr.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think based on our plans, the existing sidewalk is 1.5 meter wide, so about 5 meter in width, and
5 feet.
5 feet in width. And based on the installation of the right turning lane, that same width of the sidewalk will be installed, moved further west.
Councillor?
How does that compare to the sidewalk that's there now?
I believe, based on what I've seen, the sidewalk is a 5 meter wide sidewalk.
5 foot.
5 foot. along that stretch. I mean, we can confirm that, but based on the drawings I've seen.
And is that what's...
I think the answer is that the new one will be the same as what's there.
And is that according to the promenade plan? Is that the width that's according to the promenade plan through you, Mr. Mayor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll have to double check our plan to see whether it indicates sidewalk widths, but that's something I'll provide information during our next report back to council on that.
And at the GC, there's, I don't really understand this, but it says there's a concern with some grading issues which have resulted in higher walls at the base of buildings. So are we going to have that information coming back to us at the GC meeting?
Yes.
I've heard all the comments about commercial at grade, but I think it's setting a poor precedent for the promenade plan, and I'm not in favor of that.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought in the promenade, one of the things we wanted to do was create a pedestrian-friendly, and the idea would be to expand the walks. They do it in New York and Manhattan. They are just so wide, and I think that's you allow for benches and people to relax, and you give a bit of streetscape. The biggest problem we have south of Wellington is that the sidewalks, and I believe they're 1.5 meters, is you can't put anything, you can't do anything like that. So, and I recall, and Mr. Ramuno's going to check, but in the promenade study, that was one of the things they encouraged. And this is the opportunity for us to do that. I liken this structure to the one that is at Tyler and Yonge Street. It was recently built. It is a 4-story, I believe, and I'm not sure if it has an elevator. I think it's made out of wood. And so it's very nice looking, but the one thing I noticed right off the bat is why didn't we just move that back? Because in the promenade study, it says we should encourage it. So if it's an apartment building, we encourage it. We'll give an extra floor if it's tiered back. So that is one thing I would like to point out. Councillor Gartner put it out on the floor, and I had it marked. I would think that this is where we want to encourage what we see in the promenade study. Right across the road, Centro is putting in commercial, and I don't know, through you, Mr. Mayor, if we're going to have an issue with them saying, well, we would have liked to have done that too, given the opportunity. So I don't know what we're setting ourselves up for. I do appreciate the remarks that the proponent is making on the commercial. Little boutique stores, et cetera, aren't doing well, and if we just flooded the area with some residential, I'm in favor of that. Although it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, I am just pointing out that Centro is providing. I looked at the site, and the footprint looks bigger than the one Centro has, and that's 7 stories. So I would have liked to have seen an apartment put in there, maybe back in, but I'm not a builder, so I'll leave it at that. And if it's 6 stories, it may be a little bit more problematic with the shadows and the residents on Machel. So to Councillor Humphrey's point, bringing it down a bit isn't such a bad idea. It looks beautiful. There's no commercial because this is a stacked townhouse, only 4 stories. It's not accessible for those that have mobility issues because there's no elevator. And I think the challenge the builder has with the footprint is probably why it's not an apartment. Through you, Mr. Mayor, is there only access off of Machel in and out of this complex? Mr. Mayor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, 2 access points from Machel.
Yes, sir. It is a challenge. This spot, Machel is a challenge
before they even got there. We sort of created that in that. It's an old part of town, narrow streets. I really, I appreciate what the residents are bringing forward. Traffic and parking is a big concern. And I think we should make special concessions going forward, how we're going to enforce parking at least. And I'm satisfied that they'll keep the parking, because of the one at Tyler that I look at, I don't see a spill out from that. It's a smaller scale, but you know, they are, it's a different demographic that we're catering to. I do welcome the intensification. I like the style of the facade, that it sort of gives me that small town feeling. But my concern is the sidewalk, and I think we have an opportunity to bring that out. So I'm looking forward to seeing that at General Committee. That'll be a stumbling block. Those are basically my comments, Mr. Mayor. The builder is familiar to Aurora. He's done good work. So I am in support of working with him and moving forward on intensification. It's not exactly what I had in mind in the Promenade study, but again, I'm not a builder. They're doing the best they can. They've made every effort to broaden the scope of the project, the footprint, and I think some of the councillors here have helped and done their part on that, and we as a council. So it is what it is, and I will support it moving forward to General Committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Marcus, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple of questions through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, who's responsible within the streets of the development as far as, you know, are our bylaw officers responsible if people start parking on the streets and there's complaints as far as ticketing, or is it like a condo board where they have their own rules and regulations within the actual streets of the development?
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you're referring to parking on the future condominium lands, I don't believe our bylaw officers would have the authority to enter those private lands. Something I'd have to check with our bylaw department.
Okay, thank you. And then I know we really didn't touch on this. I am actually quite thrilled with the fact that we're going to be getting the right lane on Yonge Street going south. So I am thrilled about that. And then as far as the parking concerns, and we all touched a little bit about it, I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, maybe Ms. Van Leeuwen mentioned that she's going to be bringing a report as far as the southeast heritage area, looking at within the town park and doing some parking, with some parking issues within there. Maybe we can ask her to add this section so it can come forward a little bit earlier than waiting, and we can deal with it maybe as far as looking at the parking permit situation. So,
Machel and Irwin.
yeah, maybe she can add that on into her little work and bring it. I believe she said she's going to be bringing it in April sometime, possibly May. So maybe we can get that a little bit ahead of time. That way we can deal with it and get it done with. And that way the residents know that where we stand as far as any parking issues.
We will certainly ask her to include it.
Thank you.
Any other comments, Council? Just before I call the vote, a couple of comments. I do think that this does fit the direction that we've been looking at going, which is intensification to bring people into the downtown core. There's a bit of a cause and effect. It would be nice to have a grocery store there. If you had a big honking grocery store there, you're not putting enough people in to try and fill it. Because I do get that comment from someone at home about having a grocery store a little bit closer. And certainly we've heard that from the residents. But I also, with respect to the commercial at grade, I also get a number of comments from other business owners in town who are concerned when we put too much commercial in. So certainly one of the things that we're trying to do is create an atmosphere to enhance the commercial, certainly in the downtown area just south of Wellington. I think this helps us move towards what we want to do there. The right turn lane, I think, is a great win for us to help manage that traffic flow through there. Hopefully take some of the pressure off side streets. And that's certainly part of what we'll be looking at in terms of our overall traffic management, our overall parking issues. And certainly the parking on site conforms to the OP that was put in place 6-7 years ago. That's a plan that was derived then. Viva is indeed working diligently on their intensification of their transit capabilities down Yonge Street. Certainly, I think that a lot of people will be taking advantage of that capability, and certainly within such a close distance to the GO station, there'll be a lot of opportunity for people to live and then walk to the GO station, which might take some of the pressure off the GO parking lot that we also experienced. So I do appreciate. And last thing is that we did have some challenges that were mentioned by one of the residents with respect to traffic when the excavation was going on. I was in touch with the developer a couple of times on that, and the response was exactly as I would expect it to be. It was very good, and they got right on the situation. We do have a very good track record with this particular developer, and my experience is they build a very good product, and they're looking at